We will not fight the Third World War in Ukraine.
There is still a path for him to end this tragedy in Ukraine without getting Americans snared in a gruesome and very bloody war.
In the rarest eclipse imaginable, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are in total alignment on one thing.
That's called World War III.
World War III. I see what's happening.
Both men are adamant that Ukraine's war with Russia should not be allowed to pull us into World War III. Let's hope that the rest of America's political leadership has a clearer view of what is happening in the here and now.
I'm addressing the President Biden. You are the leader of the nation. I wish you to be the leader of the world. Being the leader of the world means to be the leader of peace.
The reality is that Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine has already produced World War II.5. Within 3 weeks, virtually the whole world has committed to repelling Russia's invasion in a kind of spontaneous, crowd-funded alternative to the fearful Armageddon tripwire.
Volodymyr Zelensky.
More than 20 countries have sent modern weaponry or military equipment to Ukraine, and as an exodus of women and children flee the war-torn country, men, including those with no military experience, are arriving from around the world to join the fight.
There's only one way to end the fighting, and that's to be willing to fight and die. If we just give up, then the Russians are just going to have their way with it.
If this isn't the fight of democracy and freedom against autocracy of our generation, I don't know what is.
Something called Ukraine has transcended the invasion, and it's time to absorb its meaning. Those of us who labor in the trenches of the culture wars tend to think of big tech's enabling of tissue-thin celebrities and so-called influencers as corrosive and toxic, and they are. And then came Volodymyr Zelensky, a man who in 2006 won his country's version of Dancing with the Stars, and today invokes wartime Prime Minister Winston Churchill to motivate not only his own people, but tens of millions outside his country.
We will fight to the end at sea, in the air. We will continue fighting for our land, whatever the cost. We will fight in the forests, in the fields, on the shores, in the streets.
We seem to have decided, for the moment anyway, that we're all NATO now, perhaps best illustrated in March 11th when 13 countries gathered for a massive weapons demonstration in Latvia. The world seems to have adopted a kind of global Article 5. An unprovoked attack on one of us is an attack on all of us.
Everybody is very aware of what's on the world, and we have to make sure that we're ready, and we're ready with our natures.
Ukraine has put two impulses in motion, to help and to defend. The Help Ukraine reaction emerges paradoxically from the do-good compulsions of our age, an impulse that usually manifests itself as unfocused virtuousness, as with progressive climate warriors. But with Ukraine, we seem to have arrived at an unexpected conjunction between virtue signaling and genuine virtue. And while this flight from fake benevolence may not last, for now, it's the real thing. But Ukraine's more lasting effect may be the discovery of the need to be able to defend oneself. World War II was a long time ago, but even younger Europeans surely recognize that the rubble of Kharkiv and Mariupol looks a lot like many of their own cities in 1945. Deterrence requires a willingness to spend national wealth on defense, as Ukraine chose to do 8 years ago, and as NATO, it appears, is willing to do now.
We are reinforcing our collective defense.
But spending on defense is always an uphill fight, and ahead of Mr. Zelensky's speech to Congress, the White House was already dismissing requests for a no-fly zone or MiG fighter jets.
To put it bluntly, is Zelensky wasting his time tomorrow asking for these things?
Well, I would say because of the passion and the courage and the bravery of President Zelensky, there has been support for expediting the delivery of a historic amount of military and security assistance.
Invocations of World War III sound like excuses now to revert later to the pre-Ukraine status quo. And yet the world's adoption of Ukraine, a spontaneous recognition that suddenly we ended up in World War II.5, suggests people will be looking for a lot more than the Cold War status quo from their national leaders.
Everybody likes to talk about freedom, but freedom only really goes to people who are willing to show up and fight for it, whether it be at the ballot box or at a war.
Давай, давай.